Hi, everyone. Rex Saldana here, along with my friend Mark Stevens.
Hey there, I'm back.
And we're back with another Eurythmics podcast. And I know everyone's been waiting with bated breath for this next one.
What's
um, we're going to be talking on this podcast about the two hits compilations that Eurythmics released over their career. First one being Greatest Hits in '91, and then the Ultimate Collection, which came out in 2005. So we'll be getting into that shortly. But first, we want to bring up the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and remind everybody to vote daily through uh, the end of April, I believe. And an interesting development, Mark, you want to talk about the Dolly Parton thing a little bit?
Yeah, this happened, what, I guess a week or 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure. But yeah, Dolly Parton, who is still fourth in the fan rankings, but she asked fans not to vote for her, or actually, no, that's not quite correct. She asked to really not be considered for the Hall of Fame, and she said she sort of wasn't sure she was worthy of that because she wasn't, quote, a rock artist. Of course, Dolly Parton, she's a country artist, pop, but she has, certainly crossed over into pop. And I don't think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is specifically about rock music as that kind of cliche might be. So it was interesting because, and she kind of joked about it. She said, well, she may record a rock album sometime that she's wanted to, and then she'd be worthy. Of course, she has recorded many things. Recorded, of course, Stairway to Heaven, and on her version of that before. So, I'm a little sad about that because I'm originally from Tennessee, and Dolly Parton is a very important person in Tennessee. I was at the opening day of Dollywood,
Oh, wow.
park, so, and she really is, I think she's a force of nature. She is an incredibly important person to music, in many facets. And I think she's completely worthy of being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But here's the kind of thing about these Hall of Fames. It means a lot to me if Eurythmics get into the Hall of Fame. I don't know how much it means to the artist. I'm sure it's an honor to be, Eurythmics are already in the UK Hall of Fame. They're about to be inducted for their 2020 induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, but they're actually going to have the ceremony now because COVID's over in just a couple of months or something. I don't know what it means to the artist. Do you? I mean, what's your thought on that?
Um, Personally, I think it depends on the type of artist you're dealing with. Some artists would be like, "Oh, I've been waiting for this, and I've been wanting this validation, and I'm glad I'm in." And then I think you have the artists that are genuinely thrilled to be in. They weren't courting it; they didn't really expect it. They're thrilled to be in. And then I think you have the kind of artists who will talk the talk and say they're happy to be nominated, they're happy to be in, but really don't care. I'm not sure where Eurythmics fall in all that. Maybe somewhere between, the last two I said.
When they were first nominated, what was it, in 2018, was it? And, and they both said, well, this came out of the blue. We had no idea, we were being considered, and they seemed really honored. And I think it's that kind of thing. I think you're honored by that, and
Yeah. Yeah.
but I don't think it changes your viewpoint if you were worthy or not.
Right.
So, but it is interesting. We should say, that Dolly Parton said to fans, and to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, really, I think she said something to the effect of, I don't want to split the votes. And I think what she meant was she doesn't want to keep somebody out that she would think could be worthy. So we did notice almost immediately in the fan vote that we keep talking about, make sure you go vote every day, for Eurythmics for the Hall of Fame. And Eurythmics are currently in fifth place. And you said you had just checked it before and Dolly, I mean, you saw it from the beginning that her vote started going down and that fans sort of listened to her. Not everyone, she's still getting votes, but you started seeing that. And Eurythmics are about to take over that fourth place spot.
Yeah, it looked like it could happen. I'm not. I'm not the kind of person that worries about what place they're in, you know. And it's like I'm just honored that they're on the list. But yeah, no, it would be interesting if they sort of surpassed Dolly and but you know, going back to Dolly for a second, I have to say I believe she deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because like you said, it's not exclusively about rock per se. And I mean, she's had many pop hits. Let's not forget that she wrote one of the biggest pop singles in history
Yeah.
that Whitney Houston recorded. If that doesn't give her Rock and Roll Hall of Fame credibility, I don't know what does. So,
Right. I mean, you know, uh, part uh, part of Whitney Houston's, you know, um, placement in the Hall of Fame, which she's in the Hall of Fame, right? Whitney Houston is in.
not sure about that, but probably most likely.
I have to check, but you know that you know, yeah, Dolly wrote that, you know, and sometimes people are surprised that she wrote "I Will Always Love You." People didn't know it, you know, that heard Whitney Houston's version for the first time, you know that, but
Well,
yeah,
think about like Jolene, which has been covered by so many artists, including rock artists like the White Stripes.
yeah,
I mean, she certainly, in my mind, she certainly belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think it's lovely what she said and what she did, and I think that shows what a genuinely nice person she is, and I respect how she believes. But I feel she deserves to be in there. So,
oh, I don't think we said this, but the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame itself came out the day or two later and said, well, we appreciate what you say, Dolly, basically, but some of the 1,200 people who actually do the voting for the Hall of Fame had already started voting, so they weren't taking her name out. And my guess is if she is voted in by whoever these 1,200 members are that actually do all this voting, that she'll be inducted. I don't think they're not going to do it because I think they said basically we think everyone on this list is worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. We've already decided that they're worthy. Now it's up to the people who vote.
yeah.
So we'll see.
I could see her getting in for two reasons. One, she deserves it, and it's been a long, you know, and she certainly has been eligible for a while. And secondly, this whole thing may have actually spurred some of the voters to say, you know what, we love you, Dolly, and we get what you're saying, but we still think you should be in here, like I was saying. So, yeah, it wouldn't be interesting if she did get in and performed and did something kind of more rock and roll to sort of, or maybe, you know, she talked about a rock album. Maybe it'd be funny if she like put one out like really quickly after this, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm all for it. You know, if we can have a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions ceremony concert with Annie Lennox and Dolly Parton. Hey, if they want to get together and sing "Sisters" or doing it for themselves, hey, I'm all for it.
Yes, or maybe Pat Benatar if she gets in, and Dolly and Annie can all sing it together with Dave on the guitar and all that. Anyhow, this is not a Dolly Parton podcast, so we will get back to the topic at hand, which is the two greatest hits albums that Eurythmics have put out, and you know, there's. The first one came out in '91, Greatest Hits, after Eurythmics announced their hiatus, if you want to call it that. They never did official split. Went on to sell gazillion copies in the UK. It was one of the biggest albums of the year. Did very well over here. Sold, was it 3 million over here in the US? 3 or 4 million?
Yeah.
So.
But it only, you know, its top position on the charts here was 76.
Right. It was a slow. Yeah, that happened over several years.
Yeah.
The certification here, and I think that it was also helped in the U.S. by Annie's solo career, which was pretty big here as well. So there was in the '90s, you know, Annie Lennox was selling records as a solo artist. Eurythmics were selling records, the Greatest Hits album. It was you know, like the early '90s through the mid to late '90s, they were selling a lot of records, her and Eurythmics.
Well, it's interesting. You know, a lot of people did discover her in the '90s as a solo artist.
Oh yeah,
or rediscovered her perhaps. And,
well,
you know,
I have a funny story. I was at the VH1 Honors in '95 where she performed and she was given a charity award for her charity work. And she sang "Whiter Shade of Pale," dressed as the Pagliacci. And then she also duetted with Smokey Robinson.
Right. Yeah.
That same show. Anyhow, there was a younger guy sitting next to me. I would have been around 30, 31. Then the younger guy was clearly like early 20s. And he was telling me, oh, I never really got into Eurythmics, but when she went solo, I mean, wow, now I'm just this huge Annie Lennox fan. And so it's kind of like, yeah, you saw that. You saw people who didn't know Eurythmics get into Eurythmics, and then you saw people who weren't so into Eurythmics, but they were more into Annie Lennox.
Mhm.
And you do see that in some of the fans too that prefer, some are more prefer Annie more than Eurythmics and all that. But yes, back to your point, a lot of people were turned on to, I think, Eurythmics through Annie solo success and vice versa. So.
Yeah, it's true. And you cannot forget just how big her solo career was.
Yeah.
I mean, and totally unexpected. I'm certain it was unexpected on her part that she had no expectations for it because you would have no idea. But
well, back in '85, Robert Hilburn, that LA Times critic,
yeah,
put out an article about all of the current female singers and how he thought they would fare moving forward and all that. And he mentioned Annie Lennox. She will sell a gazillion records when she goes solo.
Oh, really?
There was this was in 1985,
uh-huh.
and that turned out to be true. I mean, Eurythmics albums in the U.S. went platinum, or they went gold, or they didn't go either. She came along, and both of her solo albums went double platinum. I mean, it was big, big, big. If you were a Eurythmics or Annie fan, those were your glory days, I think, when she was having all those hits in the early '90s and mid '90s here in the U.S. I'm talking more U.S. centric because they were always big everywhere else. Big here too, not as big, but yeah, she got you could say she became a household name in the '90s.
Yeah, well, Walking on Broken Glass was on the adult contemporary charts for more than a year, or right at a year.
Yeah.
So
you were saying you were surprised about the success of Diva and all that. When I knew something was up, about a month before the album came out, I was in a gas station gassing up, and they were playing Why.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm hearing Why 2 months before the album comes out in a gas station in the United States. That was kind of my clue that, okay, something is different here.
Yeah.
And,
something's up. Yeah.
What?
Remember the top, whatever the top 40 was, and I forget who were the specific host, but when Broken Glass was released and they played it on the top 40 as the single they thought was most likely to be number one. Now, I think it got to 11, which is kind of odd because it was such a massive radio hit.
Although I think it was 1 or 2 on adult contemporary.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Charted on all sorts of different things. And I think that was, when the charts were being kind of weird and funky. She became a huge hit when grunge had become the thing about music. And so again, of course, we've got to get to the greatest hits. That's what this is about. But then again, you still say, even then, she was doing the complete opposite of what everybody else was doing.
Right.
So leave it to Annie, so that's why we do. But
I still remember the first time I heard Walking on Broken Glass on the album, the first time you heard that song, it was just like, what? Wow. It was, I remember there were people with me when I was listening to that. And even my friends were like, wow, what a song. That's going to, and then, comments like, that'll be a big hit.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, yeah. Anyhow, we should probably get to the topic of the greatest hits and Ultimate Collection. Everyone knows there's like several different versions of the original greatest hits. There's the US version with less tracks. There's the UK European version with more tracks. There's vinyl editions with less and more. And always been kind of a thorn in our side fans that that the album was so different in different territories, and like what they omitted off the US album that should have been on there and all that.
Yeah, the US album, the US Greatest Hits, only has 14 cuts. And what is it on the UK version? It's
the UK version has 18.
18, that's right. And the only thing I can think of, 1989, We Two Are One debuted on Arista Records in the U.S., and it was a big deal. Clive Davis, the huge, record chief, he was. This was a feather in his cap that he had gotten Eurythmics to come to his label. Of course, the U.S. Greatest Hits has um, The King and Queen of America, Angel, and Don't Ask Me Why. 3 tracks from We Two Are One. And it doesn't have Right By Your Side. It doesn't have Sex Crime. So I think what this was for the U.S. version was it was going to be released by Arista, and Arista was going to make more money by putting on more of the tracks that they had. That's the only thing I can think of. And the other thing that's weird is the track listing is so different that it starts with Sweet Dreams, and then it goes, the second track is When Tomorrow Comes, which was never even released in the US. It was never even a single in the US. But I think there was discussion that they might release When Tomorrow Comes as a single from this in the US. That did not happen. But I think that was some discussion back in the day. Because they did have a video, of course. They had a video that had already been shot that had never been shown in the U.S. So, and a later version, a part of their later time period, so she wouldn't have looked like she did in 1983. It wasn't like they'd be releasing that. So they did release as a promo video, Sweet Dreams Live from Heaven. And I've got a copy of that in my collection. And I remember, and it was just the oddest thing. Like, why on earth did you release that of all things to promote the greatest hits in 1991? Didn't make sense to me.
What was that, a re-release of the whole video album?
Just a promo video, that one track that was sent out. I don't even know who you sent out videos to, but I got
it was the live performance of Sweet Dreams from Heaven?
Heaven, from the Sweet Dreams video album.
Wow, that's a collectible I'm completely not aware of.
Yeah, it's downstairs somewhere in my.
Wow. Okay, I did not know about that.
It never made sense to me.
Steve Gaylor, if you're listening, I have not heard of that.
When I got it, I was hoping it was some sort of new greatest hits video that had been created for it, and it was just Live from Heaven. It was
that's interesting. And of course, they also released that promo CD single of Sweet Dreams '91.
Right.
That said something about newly recorded vocals by Annie Lennox.
And I still don't think that's the case, and I don't know where they come up with that. If it's newly recorded vocals, I never could tell.
I think it might have been like backing vocals, like ooh, that kind of stuff.
That was. But let's talk about the 2 singles from it in England. And the first was Love is a Stranger, then a lot of new remixes to it. And I think those were newly recorded vocals from Annie. They were very odd. Somebody once referred to them as she recorded them down the telephone because they have that sort of kind of sound. But they were kind of really interesting remixes. They really were.
Yeah, they were.
And I think it charted again, which makes Love is a Stranger a single that charted 3 different times.
was that also called Love is a Stranger 91 or something like that?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Something like that.
And then they also had Sweet Dreams, and it had the got re-released there as the 91 single.
Yeah.
And what? Even back in the day, I was hoping, and we should say real quickly, doesn't include any tracks from In the Garden. And what I think they should have done, if I'd been in charge, Rex.
Yes, Mark, tell us what you would have done.
I think they should have released, they had a couple of options. I think they should have released I Love You Like a Ball and Chain as a single, because it was considered as a possible single from Be Yourself Tonight. They even had a video concept that they, of course, never did. And it's one of the tracks that it is the track that even over the years has made it into Annie's live performance, solo live performance, Eurythmics Peace Tour. The only song from the back catalog that wasn't a single that they would still perform. Mm-hmm. So it's it's clearly an important song to them. It's one of my favorite songs,
Me
but
too.
it's such a great song. And I think you could have released that as a single and put it on, maybe even they could have redone it somewhat. But the other thing is, I think they could have redone Never Gonna Cry Again or Take Me to Your Heart even from In the Garden. I think it would have been just cool to release Never Gonna Cry Again as an updated version, much more like the one that was performed in concert, which is much more deep performance. Then Love is Strange and Sweet Dreams. It seemed to me like that's kind of going backward, you know.
Yeah. I agree with you that it would have been interesting for them to redo some of the songs from In the Garden, but I think while In the Garden is a proper Eurythmics album, I don't think they have fond memories of that era. There was a lot of stuff going on with them personally, and I just don't think that, that when they're looking, I think when they were looking maybe to redo something, they wouldn't think of that. I could be wrong. I
don't know.
I don't think that was a particularly happy time for either one of them. She had the breakdown, he had the collapsed lung. There was the whole the album was kind of a flop. Were they going to succeed? What were they going to do next? It was a rough time for them. And
yeah, but that's the beauty of it. They succeeded despite all that, and it did give them, and they went on and performed those tracks as far as even on the Touch tour. So they were still, they were still plucking them out and performing.
Of course,
and there were
on the Touch tour, they didn't have many albums under their belt.
True, but Jonice Jameson and Charlie Wilson performed "Never Gonna Cry Again" as a duet in the early versions of the Revenge tour. They did, and it's a rollicking, soul version of "Never Gonna Cry Again," and so there was still something about it.
I didn't know that. I didn't know they did that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Oh, it's worth hearing. We'll bring it up in an upcoming podcast that we've got planned. We'll bring that up. But
I can't believe I still have things to learn.
Amazing that we both do every time, and we all do. Someone will post on one of their Eurythmics boards, and I'm like, "Oh, well, I never knew that." Or it's either that, or I'm forgetting. I'm not sure. My memory isn't as good as it used to be. But
let's talk a little bit about the Laserdisc that was released.
Yeah.
We all know that a home video, the VHS cassette, was released, and I know as a Eurythmics fan, I was so thrilled to have all their videos properly released in a store-bought format. I think we all had our videotapes over the years where we recorded all the videos off MTV and all that. But I remember when that came out, I was just like in seventh heaven because, well, Eurythmics Video Visionaries, my site is dedicated all to their stunning video work. And so, yeah, I ate, lived, breathed those videos in the 80s. I know them back and forward, and although clearly not as much as I thought, since I didn't catch that, what was that in the Wide-Eyed Girl video? I'll put that down to the grainy videotape of the era, and so I couldn't see it very well.
And this would be right then. So Greatest Hits, the video album, was released on DVD, but that came a few years later, didn't it?
Yes, that came in the late 90s as part of, they would call it Platinum Performances.
Platinum Performances, that's right. So what we got when the album Greatest Hits was released was VHS and the Laserdisc, and I had a Laserdisc player by that point.
Yeah, me too.
And it was just amazing.
Yeah.
Quality.
I think I mentioned in a previous podcast that all of the original screenshots on my website of stills from the videos were all taken from those initial Laserdiscs. Because from that initial Laserdisc, because that was back then, that was the clearest, best quality picture we had was Laserdisc until the DVD came out,
Yeah. So, and
of course now we have the 4K and HD remasters, which is even better.
Yeah. So, yeah, but even I think for fans, we had all the songs. So the Greatest Hits being released, well, that's kind of a fun thing. But it was the video album of all those singles, because we hadn't had that. We'd had Savage, of course, and We Two Are One, but none of the rest of
And
those.
live.
But except for Who's That Girl, Sweet Dreams, and Love Is a Stranger on Sweet Dreams, the video album. And the horrible thing, that Sweet Dreams, the credits roll over the video in Sweet Dreams.
Oh, I know. I know, that was awful. Yeah, that was awful. But the exciting thing for US fans was that we finally got to see the videos for When Tomorrow Comes and A Miracle of Love, which we hadn't seen in the US. The first time I ever saw those was on the home video. Yeah. And so, this was back before YouTube. Had we had YouTube then, we would have been able to see everything. But
yeah, but it's fascinating to go back on the Greatest Hits, how big that album was.
Yeah,
it was number one in Australia, number one in Austria, number one in Belgium, number one in the Netherlands, number one on European albums. They would have a European, top albums. Number one in France, number one in Germany, number one in Ireland, number one in New Zealand, number one in the UK, and like you said earlier, I think it was number one for multiple weeks, 10 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
And it was one of the biggest selling albums of the year.
Yeah, I've got some certification stats in front of me. In the US, it went triple platinum. In the United Kingdom, it went 6 times platinum, double platinum in Switzerland, platinum in Sweden, Spain, Norway, 4 times platinum in New Zealand, gold in Japan and Finland. Surprised it has only went gold in Japan, and 5 times gold in Germany. So that's just some of the stats. So yeah, it was quite the success, and I think that shows you the strength of their songwriting, the strength of the quality of their songs, and just the fact that they always presented everything in such a unique, interesting way.
And I think the sad thing about it all is that Dave and Annie had gone their separate ways and needed a break, as they say, in 1990 at the end of the revival tour, basically. And I don't think there was any of them getting together for any of this. Clearly they did some things, because she did record some vocals for the Love Is a Stranger reissue single and possibly Sweet Dreams, although I still don't understand what that is, if that's the case. So, it was a little, I think it would have been a different kind of thing, perhaps, had they still been together and the record company says, hey, it's time for a Greatest Hits kind of thing. They probably would have done some things differently, but it was that really kind of sad period where they both said, we're on a break, and they really weren't doing a lot of talking to one another, I don't think.
Right.
And of course she was moving toward that she was going to record a solo album and all that.
It's interesting. I always thought that the picture sleeve for that Sweet Dreams 91, which shows like a starburst or like something, it looks like something's coming. I always took that as a precursor to her solo career. It looked like, something's developing, something's coming, something's shining bright.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought, when I looked back on it, I thought maybe that was meant to be a reference to what was coming.
Never know.
But definitely, I think the fans would say that the European version of the Greatest Hits is the definitive one to own, because it has 18 tracks and it covers pretty much everything.
Yeah, it doesn't forget Sex Crime. It doesn't forget the 1984 album.
But we should talk about Ultimate Collection, which came out in 2005, which contained 2 new songs, which of course was the big thrill for Eurythmics fans. Yeah. I've Got a Life and Was It Just Another Love Affair? I Got a Life, of course, had a video and was released as a single and was quite a successful single, even in the US. I believe it got to 29 on Adult Contemporary. And that was, to me, that was something, considering they had been out of the picture for a while and all that.
I think number 1 on the dance charts for 3 weeks.
Yeah. But the Ultimate Collection is really, frankly, far from ultimate. It doesn't have sex crime on it. It doesn't have anything from We Two Are One on it,
or In the Garden.
or In the Garden. So it's a bit odd that it's called the Ultimate Collection. I know Annie made a comment when she was asked something similar about, why is it called Ultimate Collection if there's if not everything is on it? And I think her answer was something like, well, we thought it was the best representation of us at the time. Something along those lines, I remember her saying. And I thought, well, and she also made a comment about perhaps we made one album too many. And I think she was referring to We Two Are One, because I don't believe Peace had come out yet.
Well, yeah, no,
I don't know.
yeah, Peace.
Well, yeah, but I think she was referring to We Two Are One, which, I know they were having, difficulties at the time, personalities clashing and all that. So maybe that's where that's coming from. But it is odd that nothing from that album is on Ultimate Collection, considering that it was a very successful album worldwide, did very well in the UK and in Europe, and did well here, actually. Did better than Savage did here. And yeah, I just find it odd that, Don't Ask Me Why is not on there, King and Queen of America. Just very strange.
I think unfortunately, Don't Ask Me Why, which again is one of my top 5 Eurythmics songs. I love that song. I love everything about that song.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think because Annie's signature solo debut hit, and it's such an important, is called Why. And I think there probably is some, hesitation to have this song that clearly.
Oh, you think people might buy it thinking it's Why, but it's really Don't Ask Me Why?
There is kind of a boo-boo on the Peace Tour DVD that at some point, and I haven't played that DVD in a long time, it says Don't Ask Me Why. And you click on it and it goes to the Why.
Oh, I remember that. Yes, yes.
So I don't know if there was ever some discussion, okay, we're going to perform Don't Ask Me Why. And then there was like, no, we're going to let Annie do a couple of her solo hits or something, but that was weird. But
Hey, I wanted to bring up something that I thought was very interesting. When Annie's song Why opens, you hear da-na-na, na-na-na. What do you hear when 17 Again opens?
Oh,
da-na-na, da-na-na. It's the same melody.
how interesting.
Is that a comment? Is that a comment? I don't know.
Very interesting, possibly. Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that? Has that ever occurred to you?
But no, you're right. That is kind of that sort of.
It's the same thing. Ding, ding, ding. So I don't know. Is that a nod to her? We're back, but she had this solo career, or Why I think was kind of perceived as kind of the breakup song for Dave and Annie. This boat is sinking, and which brings back the imagery of them in the Sweet Dreams boat.
Mm-hmm. And I can still read what you're thinking. They always said very, very specifically they knew what that Annie knew what Dave was thinking, and Dave knew what they were so in tune, no pun intended, musically that. So it has always seemed like it was less of a romantic breakup than it did have a little bit to do.
Well, yeah, I think if you knew the history of Dave and Annie, you maybe took it that way. If you were just a lay person,
Yeah.
it would just be a song about a disintegrating relationship. And it's probably both. Well,
and she would be the first to say that none of her songs, are one specific biographical thing. It stems from something and then it goes from there. But there is one thing. The iTunes version of Ultimate Collection does have a bonus track, which is the King and Queen of America. So
I didn't know that.
Your one is represented in the Ultimate Collection on one of the various formats that you could get, which is interesting. But I was, so you had the 2 new songs. They said they recorded 3 new songs, but only 2 made the album. We still have never been.
Well, it was revealed that they had done a duet with Kellis, that artist, and that was when they were doing the tracks for Ultimate Collection. So it may be that song that we know that's never been released. I think Dave's even mentioned it. So that's in the vault somewhere.
This vault that we can't get to.
And apparently neither can Dave or Annie.
Apparently, you're correct on that. Yeah. So, yeah, but um, was it just another love affair?
Which I think is such a great song. And I think Dave described it as like a song you hear at the summertime on the radio when you're in a park or something, and it just comes out over the radio, and it's just there, and
Yeah, I saw something. I was watching a video with them, and he said he kind of said it was kind of an R&B track, but also very contemporary. Is how he put it. I will tell you this: I have not liked that song.
oh really?
And in preparation for this podcast, Rex, I have listened to it several times. I have somewhat changed my mind, but for many years I skipped over it. I did not like it.
Really? I always love the bass in it, and
Go ahead.
no, I just love the bass, and I love the another love affair, love affair, love affair, that kind of stuff, and
I like the lyrics a lot. And I think it's a song that 3/4 of the way through needed to fade out. It's sort of the last part of the song that, for some reason, and I can't tell you why, for some reason, it bugs me. It's never been a favorite song of mine. I kind of wish it had been, because the lyrics are so beautiful, and I kind of wonder. So I'm going to throw this out there and see what you think. That it's something that she would have written and recorded for Bear, which came out only a couple years before this album. To me, it would have fit very well on Bear in a way, which is an album that I do really like. Reminds me a little bit of The Hurting Time, which is another song that's on Bear, and it's a song that I really don't like. And Bear is an album that I adore, with the exception of The Hurting Time. I don't love that song.
The Hurting Time is. Are you familiar with The Rainy Night in Georgia by Brooke Benton? It's an old single from the 70s. It always reminded me of that and that type of song. Kind of an early 70s kind of slow, kind of like soulful song. I do think it's a bit too long on the album.
Yeah.
But I do like it. I do like it.
I would love to have seen. I think when you read the lyrics, it's a very painful song, and I would have loved it as some sort of song that could make you weep. A change of music, but nevertheless, too neutral. And I did read somewhere the other day where someone said that that the two new songs were leftovers from Peace, which is absolutely not true. That they were not leftovers from Peace whatsoever. They even talk about it, that in many, many interviews that they got back together and over a martini or something and ended up with were these 3 songs too that made the album. But I don't know where people get these things, like what.
But going back to Was It Just Another Love Affair, I always thought it's a Eurythmics song, but it didn't sound like the typical Eurythmics song. It was almost it was kind of jammy, like jammy, and that the bass was so emphasized. I do know that at that time, that kind of sound was fairly big. These kind of jam bands were big, and
I think that's probably what Dave meant by contemporary. That it would have that sort of contemporary sound.
But what I like the most about the song, I think, is the bass and her vocals. But
I did make a point. I listened to it over and over, and I was sort of surprised. I said to myself, "Well, this isn't as bad as you remember." Except about 3/4 of the way, and I'm like, okay, I can dial this down, but it does. It's beautiful lyrics. I will say that.
Yeah.
It had, so that album had 19 tracks on, which would never, because, and when it was released 2005, we didn't get vinyl on that. There was no vinyl for the Ultimate Collection.
No, that was that space when vinyl had gone out, but before it came back in.
And we didn't mention that Greatest Hits had two different vinyl releases with it in 91. And then in 2010, which is 5 years after the Ultimate Collection, that the original Greatest Hits was issued on vinyl and 180 gram audio file, which and had a great track list. So
Yeah, as a double LP.
yeah, I mean, as a double LP, and just so when we were talking about doing a podcast on the two hits collections, there it is so interesting that Greatest Hits would get a reissue following Ultimate Collection on vinyl, and Ultimate Collection was never on vinyl. So the whole
my idea on that is, vinyl started to become big again, and they were like, okay, well, let's put out their greatest. This is the one that sold the most. The greatest hit that sold the most, and it's the one everybody is most I think the most recognizable one.
Yeah. But Ultimate Collection, of course, it did precede the box set of all the Eurythmics albums, with the exception of 1984, being reissued and remastered with all the bonus tracks that came out and it was called Boxed, right?
Yeah, Boxed, yeah.
The Ultimate Collection, Greatest Hits Collection, preceded that by a week or two,
right?
Being released, and so it was almost a promotional, thing for Boxed and stuff. So it was a really exciting time for fans. We were getting a lot of these songs that we'd never heard from the TVP project, some other pieces a lot of people hadn't heard.
So, I've heard that those are the original TVP tracks from the 80s, but when I listen to them on these remastered albums from the mid-00s, I think, is it possible, that Dave tinkered with them and updated the sound and stuff? Because they sound so current and modern. They don't sound like they were from, their music is always timeless and has always not sounded dated. But these tracks sounded like, even to me, that were like even more modern. It's like, were they that modern back in the 80s, or did he tinker with them a little bit, I wonder, in for the re-release?
Possible, but I do think some of them sound very much like demos. I don't think they're
like the My Girl or My Guy.
Yeah, those are very not really, almost like not really completed. They're pretty good, of course. And of course, what's the one? Last Night I Dreamed.
Last Night I Dreamt Somebody Loved Me.
Yeah, that's a great song, and that seems pretty well fleshed out, I think.
Yeah, same with Hello, I Love You.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's Come Together. So they had a lot of
Come Together
put together on this box set.
Well, if he didn't do any tinkering to them in the mid-00s, then I have to say, wow, if we had heard those in the 80s like we were meant to, I think they would have really stood out.
Yeah. As they did. So it would be interesting to see that.
Well, I think just to sum all this up for fans who are still trying to, maybe for younger fans or new fans who are not as aware, you definitely want the European version of Greatest Hits. And of course, you're going to want Ultimate Collection too, because it's got two songs on it that have never been released, but it's far from an Ultimate Collection, that's for sure.
And remastered, of course. It's remastered, so that's good. Of course.
But everything is still in print, like the DVD of the videos is still in print. And
what does the original Greatest Hits have on it that Ultimate doesn't? The extended version of Sweet Dreams. And it doesn't even say on it, Sweet Dreams are made of this extended version.
Right.
You just get the almost 5-minute version of Sweet Dreams, which was the version on the 12-inch single, which was interesting that they did that, and actually didn't really promote it that they had done it.
Right. I wonder if it was just a case of when they went to the master tapes, they just put that one and didn't realize it was.
I could see someone at the record company like, this is probably it.
Yeah.
But the chart positions weren't anywhere close to being that 1991 Greatest Hits.
I think that's because everybody had that Greatest Hits. It sold so many copies.
But it did well. Went 3 times platinum in the UK, 2 times platinum in Australia, 2 times platinum in Ireland. It did well. It did well, but like you said, the Greatest Hits was a very popular album. It had most of those tracks, and I think a lot of reviews for Ultimate Collection, a lot of them said, and no one, dismissed the idea that this is a great collection of songs. But I think a lot of people thought the Ultimate Collection could have been a 2 CD
Yeah,
version that would have gone sort of deeper into the album cuts. But
right.
like we said, really the point of all that when it was released was the the boxed album that had all the albums remastered and bonus tracks and stuff. So that was really
Well,
sort of the big thing that came out.
yeah, and if you look at the certifications for Ultimate Collection, I mean, Australia 2 times platinum, United Kingdom 3 times platinum, Ireland 2 times platinum, and this is after everybody had already, bought Greatest Hits. So that shows you that there was still a market there for people to buy those Greatest Hits.
Yeah.
I I think the reason why I didn't do better in the U.S. was because it wasn't really promoted here in the U.S. all that well. And, we already had a triple platinum Greatest Hits here, and Arista probably thought, well,
Yeah.
I mean, the only promotion it really got was that I've Got a Life was kind of somewhat a minor hit here. But would you even know there was a Greatest Hits tied with that if you didn't really know?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was interesting that that it did that. So that it had that kind of weird shelf life. But again, popular enough. And 2005. This is what? Well, 6 years after Peace, but far after their huge '80s heyday. So,
I wouldn't be surprised if you looked at the current certifications of it that it's probably sold more than what we've even seen now. Because it's 17 years now it's been out.
Yeah, and it would be the one that you would most likely find. It'd be the one that that's still available. But and it had its own DVD that had all the music videos. Again, 2 Greatest Hits video collections. Neither one which includes Never Gonna Cry Again. Still can't figure that out. I think there's some legal issue, maybe.
I think there's legal kind of I don't know, like union issue. I don't know, those kind of things.
Of course, the Ultimate Collection video does not have Beethoven. The original did. And to me, you can't have Chill and I Need a Man without Beethoven.
Exactly.
You can't do it. So, but and Peace has its own, I'm not sure about, on Peace, but nothing from We Two Are One. To me, that's just wrong. It needed at least one of the singles from We Two Are One, but so
right. Well, and it did have. It had 17 again, and I Saved the World Today. So yeah, it's just. I think they were kind of down on We Two Are One for a while, because it was kind of the end of their career. But I think, well, fans always loved it. The public loved it. It was a big hit. I know in recent times that as I've listened to We Two Are One, I've always liked it, but I like it even more now than I did then. So
the DVD for Ultimate Collection just had I Saved the World Today. It didn't have the video for 17 again.
Oh, right. That's right.
Those are two videos that really kind of go together. But that also never had its own release where you had those videos. And I think that's a real shame. That
17 again that's not commercially available, is it?
No.
The video.
No. And that's such a shame because this would have been the perfect place for it. Could they really not get one more 4-minute video on this DVD?
It was an odd thing, and when you hear them talk about it, they almost kind of, they talk like, yeah, we're not so sure either. So you wonder just how much involvement there was there, or I don't know.
I think the involvement probably was a lot of Dave that, trying to find all of these bonus tracks for the box set. And of course, that's a whole other podcast, the number of items that are missing.
Well, yeah. That's because we are still to receive at some point down the line probably a release of Eurythmics B-sides and rarities, with all the odd stuff like Lentils and Rice and ABC Freeform and all that stuff. I love those weird experimental B-sides. That was one of the things that I loved about Eurythmics was those experimental B-sides, and and I would play those for people in the 80s, and they'd be like, what is wrong with you? Why do you like this? It's like, well, it's called experimenting and it's called avant-garde, and
well,
I mean, ABC Freeform is like sort of like oh, now I'm blanking on this White Light, White Heat. What band was that? The Velvet Underground. It's very much like a Velvet Underground kind of song. Anyhow, so
to your poor friends who were inflicted on hearing you take some lentils and you take some rice, that does take a certain person to love that song. I'm glad you gave it. I'm glad you played it for them, but I understand if they thought, that's not really that catchy.
Yeah.
But no.
I know the part where he says is really, really asinine. And I remember, I think I said this in another podcast. I did it just the same for one of my friends one time from 1984. Was it just her vocals and they, when it was over, they looked at me and said, "Boy, you'll just buy anything by this band, won't you?" Which I completely disagree with that comment, because I think that's a fantastic track and a fantastic album, and I just don't think that person got it. So,
well, I suspect this person thought, well, she's not singing anything; she's just
right
noise, and she probably thought, like, yeah, that's not really a song, Rick. That's probably her.
And wasn't that kind of the American critical reaction to the album? It's like, it's a soundtrack. Where are the, that we all know about that Rolling Stone review. That
you can't get over that.
Well, we should probably wrap this podcast up on Greatest Hits and Ultimate Collection. We're at 50 minutes. We were going to try for 30 minutes. We can never keep it to 30 minutes.
Well, we should just stop saying that, because we know we can't do it. But I think the biggest thing is, while people are deciding if they're worthy of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, two, in essence, greatest hits collections that both sold very well across the world and has collected, an immense amount of hit singles. And, I think, again, that goes back to saying they're very worthy of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame based on their single output alone.
Right.
And, both greatest hits collections showcase that really well. So.
Yeah. Well, I think a good way to close is to remind everybody to go and vote daily at the Rock Hall of Fame.
And, I haven't voted today. I haven't voted. I usually do it in the morning, and I haven't voted yet. I've got to go do that now. Thank you, Rex, for the reminder.
All right, everyone. Well, we'll be back soon with another podcast.
Really exciting podcast coming up. We're not going to say this. Really
yes, we've got some interesting things coming up with some interesting guests, and also I'm sure we'll be, well, not I'm sure, I know Mark and I will be back, just the two of us with more interesting dialogue about things. I know we've talked about a podcast about the Peace album, which should be interesting because it seems to be a kind of a polarizing album with fans. Personally, I think it's a brilliant album, but we'll discuss it.
All right, we will. All right, next time.
All right. All right. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.